Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today we wish a very happy birthday to Serj Tankian of System of a Down. Now, Serj is a poet, he's a musician, he's a writer, he's a fiercely passionate political commentator, particularly when it comes to issues relating to Armenia. He's a very proud Armenian and talks about this all the time. But let's talk for a moment about the beginnings when the world discovered Surge and when the world discovered the band System of a Down. Now, the first commercial album came out in 1998. It was a very good album, but it was the album Toxicity, which really, really just blew up in the early 2000s. And it was really the album that the early 2000s needed. Now, there are a lot of very significant things about it culturally, some of which were in the band's control, some of which were really fate. Well, the album came out on the 4th of September 2001, just days before the September 11th atrocity. Now, on September 11th, obviously, many people sadly died. Others would develop diseases because of the explosions of the buildings that released toxic chemicals into the environment. But free speech also began to die, and a very dark cloud came over the United States and its allies after that time because of the reaction to that atrocity that we now know was not only misplaced but was sinister. Now, Team America World Police was one of the first major cultural creations to mock this atmosphere of war hysteria and censorship gone wild. And it did so brilliantly. But the album Toxicity, released before 9/11, really, really anticipated a lot. The military industrial complex was attacked ferociously by Serj and his band members on that album. Censorship, the unfairness of the prison system, the problems of sort of neo-imperialism, if you will, neoconism, neoliberalism, all of these isms that take away individual freedom, that crush communities, that imprison the innocent, that seek retribution rather than rehabilitation, that go to war. And it's really an album that was so strong in terms of its messaging. And Serge was very outspoken about things. The internet was an interesting place when this album came out because, unlike today, the internet acted as a kind of free space in the George W. Bush era of public censorship. So while radio and television became much more censored in that post 9/11 era, the internet of that time was great because you could say whatever you want, and the people in power did not care. They weren't paying attention to it on the whole. And so, in that spirit of freedom, Serge wrote a very balanced and intelligent and well researched piece in a blog about how 9/11 didn't just happen randomly, but the issues that surrounded it were all based on decades of foreign policy mistakes. Now, at that time, people still sort of believed the official story in a mechanical sense and otherwise. But the point remains that foreign policy from the Kissinger era, the LBJ era, frankly, even before, you could say, all the way up to the 90s and the Clinton era, the war crimes in the Balkans and Southern Europe that Clinton exacerbated, in my particular point of view, all of that was considered and weighed carefully in Serge's piece about that. And what happened? Well, he was absolutely attacked viciously by the mainstream media of the day. And while the internet was very, very free, there was no real social media as we'd understand it today, where his allies could have come together in one place and pushed back on those mainstream media attacks. So they really, 2001 was a real important year for System of a Down for many reasons. I said some within their control, some beyond it. They went from strength to strength as a band. Toxicity was followed up by Steal This Album, which was really, really strong as well. And musically, obviously, because we've talked about the lyricism and some of the thematic things that the band explores, but musically, they were really interesting because they incorporated really, really hard rock that borrowed a bit from the nu metal movement, but System of a Down were much more sophisticated, frankly, than a lot of the nu metal bands at the time. And they also very cleverly wove in Armenian themes and Lebanese themes because, of course, there's a substantial Armenian community in Lebanon, and I do believe that's where Serj's family are from. And so you had these sort of these non-American, non-Western style themes interspersed musically into sort of straight ahead hard rock of the era, which again produced a really interesting sound. Part of that was also in Serj's voice. Part of him was your typical heavy metal singer. Another part, you can really hear the Armenian and Lebanese Armenian influences in there. Really interesting stuff. And it takes you back to an era where the internet was more free than it is today, but where mainstream discussions were able to censor you even quicker because the internet, while free, didn't have the force and influence that it has today, where people from the grassroots can come together and stick the finger in the face of the elite. So happy birthday to Serj Tankian. Keep on doing all of the things you do. Like, subscribe. We will see you next time. Take care.